All right. Hello, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Geoff Baker, the Vice President of Editorial Content for the Seattle Kraken and former sports business reporter and columnist for the Seattle Times. He is also an author and wrote this amazing book called Rising from the Deep, the Seattle Kraken, a tenacious push for expansion and the Emerald City sports revival. Again, Geoff, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on here. The first question I want to ask you is you grew up loving hockey and you were a big Detroit Red Wings fan. But what I want to know is, did you also grow up a basketball fan as well, or did your interests sort of stem from what you would go on to do in your career?
I was actually a Montreal Canadiens fan.
Oh, really?
Because I
Okay.
yeah, no, because I grew up in Montreal. So, uh, yeah, I got to know that team very, very well. And when you're growing up in Montreal, it's very difficult to follow the NBA sometimes because they didn't have professional basketball there. So I watched, some college basketball when the NCAA tournament would be on and stuff, but I really wasn't a basketball fan. And didn't follow it all that closely until I got here to Seattle, which was about 18 years ago. So it's been a while.
It's not. I wonder where I saw. I think someone else you mentioned was a Red Wings fan in the book.
You know
Yeah.
what? That you if you read the book, the opening of the book was by Jerry Bruckheimer, the Hollywood producer,
Oh,
and
that's
so he
okay.
grew up. He grew
Gotcha.
up. He wrote the foreword to the book, so he grew up a big Red Wings fan. It's during their heyday back in the early '50s when they were
Mhm.
winning Stanley Cups all the time. But then my team came along, the Montreal Canadiens, and won 5 cups in a row. So that put an end to Jerry's dreams of seeing Stanley Cups as a kid.
Yeah. All right. Well, not off to the best start. I can't believe I got that wrong.
Do
So,
you? Oh, we could start over if you want.
oh
You want to
no,
start over? Yeah. Okay.
no. Let's just keep going. It's all
Okay.
right. My teacher
All
will love this. Uh,
right.
Adam Silver.
Gotta make the teacher happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Adam Silver has gone on to say multiple times now recently that the NBA is going to be exploring expansion once their current media rights deals up, which is of course after the season. You obviously have connections with a lot of like powerful people in Seattle sports. You work for a few of them that might know more about what's been said publicly about this. Have you talked to any of them about any of this recently? And if so, like what's the feeling among them internally?
Well, I can't share any details of private conversations I may
Yeah.
have had with people, but I think it's pretty obvious that we're expecting, um, I would expect, and just common sense would tell you that they are going to approve an expansion process fairly soon. I would say probably not this year because we're already almost the year's almost over now. We've only got 7 weeks to go. But I would think by the early portion of next year, we should see some movement on that front. The big thing to keep an eye on, I think, right now is the Boston Celtics are up for sale, and so I doubt that the league would want to move on any expansion process before that sale goes through because that sale is going to determine, in some ways, what an NBA franchise is worth. The Boston Celtics are obviously a premium franchise, so they're not your typical mom and pop NBA team. They're a legacy franchise. But there's lots of things involved in that too. They also don't own their own building, so that's something else to take into consideration. So we'll see what the price goes for when it comes to the Celtics, and then you'll see that price, and they'll say, okay, if a marquee premium franchise, albeit one that doesn't own an arena, let's say it sells for X number of billion, then what's an expansion franchise going to be worth
Mm-hmm.
at that point? And then they'll set the price tag. I would imagine for what they want to get for that expansion team, and then they'll open it up for other people to come in and bid. All these there's going to be quite a few cities that are interested. There are a lot of people that think Seattle is a front runner. Some people think Vegas is one of the front runners as well. But that'll be determined. They'll have to see who responds to the expansion application process, and then they'll take it from there. But I think first you need to see that Celtics sale go through in order to help set the price.
Right. Yeah. So I kind of want to talk a little bit more about your relationship with Adam Silver. You had many conversations with him a number of years ago when Chris Hansen still had the exclusive uh, rights to build a stadium with the city. Um, and one of the highlights of the book for me was when you approached him and he knew exactly what question you were going to ask him, but he told you to ask it anyway. And he ended up giving you a really good answer. So, what I want to know, have you had any conversations with Silver since your book was published?
That's a very good question. I don't believe I have. I've spoken to Mike Bass, who is the league's top media person, vice president in charge of media, and you know what? And no, let me take that back. I have spoken with Silver since because I
Okay.
wrote an article on Tim Lywicki of the Oakview Group, who helped build Climate Pledge Arena here in Seattle. I was doing a feature profile on him. I went down to Los Angeles for that, and one of the people I spoke to about that feature that was in September of 2017, and it was Adam Silver. So I have
Mhm.
spoken to Silver since that conversation. It was about, so I would say, it was about 15 months later after that. The conversation you referenced that's in my book. So it was about 15 months later I spoke to Silver
Okay.
by phone.
Did
Yeah.
he remember you?
Oh yeah, no, he remembered me.
Yeah.
He remembers. Adam Silver's a smart man. He doesn't just do things randomly.
Mhm.
So yeah, he would have known who I was beforehand. That's why he knew what kind of question I was going to ask him at that meeting that you referenced in April 2016, if my memory serves. Um, yeah, he knew right away what I was going to ask him. So
Right.
um, that's what smart people do in the world. They don't ask questions they don't already know the answers to, and they don't tell you to ask them questions unless they have an answer that they're prepared and a message that they are prepared to deliver. And he certainly delivered one that day.
Right, right. So when you were having all those conversations with he was adamant the NBA was not looking to expand. Do you think Chris Hansen's stunt in Sacramento caused Silver's hesitancy towards expansion, or do you think he was genuine and about wanting to complete the NBA's collective bargaining cycle first?
Well, a lot of things happened right around the same time period back then. I don't think what happened in Sacramento did Chris Hansen any favors with the
Mhm.
NBA. I don't think it ever helps to um, pull something in secret that might impact the money question when it comes to any group of rich people. You follow the money and you don't mess with the money. That's kind of the number one rule. And I think in that case, he got caught and he messed with the money a little bit. And so I don't think that helped him out. But I think an even bigger development that happened right around that time period was that Steve Ballmer decided to go and purchase the Los Angeles Clippers um, right around the time of the Sterling debacle, where he got
Mhm.
caught, making racist comments on tape, and then Silver literally pulled the plug on him within a matter of weeks. And then Ballmer was Chris Hansen's partner in Seattle, and Ballmer was the guy that the NBA really wanted to join their ownership committee. And I believe, this is my personal opinion. I think that's probably the only reason the NBA was given the Hansen Group the time of day back here in Seattle, was because Ballmer was his partner, and they wanted to get Ballmer involved in the NBA. And so once he went to the LA Clippers as their majority owner, they had Ballmer involved in the NBA. They didn't need to look at Chris Hansen anymore, um, especially when they weren't ready to expand right away. Because as you mentioned, they had the collective bargaining agreement to work out, and it turns out we've now gone through the entire cycle of that collective bargaining agreement. But I think the person they had their eye on all along might have been the guy who ultimately helped renovate the arena here in Seattle. That's Tim Lywicki. The
Right.
problem is there was all kinds of exclusivity arrangements here in Seattle that prevented Tim Lywicki or anybody from taking a look at renovating Key Arena, and that's why until the Chris Hansen project either came to fruition or died on its own. And in the end, it died about a year and a half before it had to, because the deal, he could have hung on exclusivity here for another year and a half. But in the end, the people that renovated Climate Pledge Arena, it used to be called Key Arena, they actually went to Chris Hansen and said, "Hey, can you back off this exclusivity deal? Because clearly you're not going to get an NBA team in time, and we want to take a look at this arena." And he let them do that. And so that's why we are where we are today. Again, it's a long word salad I'm giving you, a lot of talk, but it's a complicated issue. And so
Mhm.
yeah, I guess if the NBA had any hesitancy about Chris Hansen, then him getting caught with what he did, organizing that petition against the funding for a Sacramento arena, I think that hurt his cause. But I think the lethal blow in the end, when we look back on it in history, is going to be when Steve Ballmer left his group and went and got his own team, because then there was no need for the NBA to pay attention to Chris Hansen anymore.
Yeah. And also another thing with Hansen was he was not going to build the arena for an NHL team. He wanted the Sonics back specifically. So what I'm wondering is like if he was more willing to, work with the NHL because they were very interested in expanding to Seattle and they had the new Las Vegas team. Would the Kraken have come sooner if Hansen would have just sort of let go of his pride and let the NHL come in to his new Soto Arena first?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I would say yes, because the NHL wanted to put a team here, and if you go back as far as 2013, when the Phoenix Coyotes, as they were then called, were looking to move out of Phoenix, out of Arizona, potentially when they were trying to get a lease deal negotiated with the city of Glendale and in the Phoenix suburbs. Um, there was all kinds of threats that they were going to move the team to Seattle, and they didn't have a place to play here. So they had a place to play here. Yeah, that might have happened. But I think, the more realistic early scenario for hockey would have been in 2015 when the NHL ran an expansion process, and they were practically begging Seattle to apply. And there were three potential arena sites in Seattle, and none of them could get done in time because of all this political wrangling that was going on, and Hansen refusing to get involved in the process. So had Hansen turned around, because he had this exclusivity deal for the city of Seattle, which is where the NHL wanted to be. They didn't want to be in the far-flung suburbs where these other groups were trying to get a deal going. Um, the Had he thrown his hat in the ring, they almost certainly would have expanded by two teams in 2015, meaning Seattle and Vegas. And Seattle probably would have had the team by 2017. They probably would have played a couple of seasons in Key Arena and then gotten Hansen's new arena built in the Soto district. And so they would have started 4 years earlier. They would have had the Kraken 4 years earlier at that point. And so, yeah, they easily would have had an NHL team by probably, I would say, 2017. Instead, they opened in 2021. So a 4 year difference right there.
Yeah. So it wasn't mentioned specifically in your book, but when I was doing research on this, I saw some things about maybe the Port of Seattle that was very against Hansen building in the Soto district. There was like corruption in their organization among the top people. Like, can you confirm like that's true and that they were plotting to kill Hansen's deal?
Well, corruption is a very strong word, so I wouldn't use that.
Okay.
That's a legal term. As far as I know, none of them were convicted of anything criminal, so I can't say that they were corrupt.
Okay.
But I will say, yeah, yes, there were certainly people in the port that did not want to see Chris Hansen's project come to fruition. There were all kinds of reasons that were given. Transport and traffic was the primary one that they said in public. There's also been speculation that they wanted to use the land in that area for something else, and they wanted free access to the nearby waterways, and they wanted to expand the cruise ship industry nearby. There's all kinds of speculation that's been going on of what the real reason was, but the bottom line is they didn't want them in there. I've heard people say that Hansen's main goal of building the arena was to turn the surrounding area into basically an entertainment district, into restaurants, night spots, that kind of thing, that the real money was there. It wasn't in the arena itself. It was in all the land and buildings he owned around it. And I think, there was an argument that the port didn't want that to happen right in the middle of a um, maritime transportation industrial sector. And so whatever the reason was, they opposed it, and yeah, they spent a lot of money opposing him. There were lobbyists involved. There were campaigns publicly against him, but not only by the port, also by the sports teams that were there. The Seattle Mariners
Right.
did not want an arena going up right across from the parking garage that they use at their stadium. The Seattle Seahawks and the Seattle Sounders also did not want, and that doesn't get played up as much. But Paul Allen, the billionaire Paul Allen, he's
Mm-hmm.
now deceased, but he owned the Seahawks, and Paul Allen was a very important um, person in this city politically. You want to run for mayor in this city, you want to be somebody, a city councilor, you want to get something done. You usually do it with Paul Allen's blessing. You would usually go to his company, which was Vulcan, industries and try to get their blessing because they can help you out, put you in touch with a lot of powerful people. They can finance your campaign. They can do all kinds of stuff. So if Paul Allen is opposing you, if his football team is opposing your arena, that's not a good start politically to try to get anything done in the city. So I think it's a combination of all those forces, which were local tenants in that area, very powerful people. I think them combined really did not help Hanson's cause. It hindered it, if anything. And in the end, really, what killed Hanson's project was a vote. Officially, was a vote by City Council, which was in April of 2000, May of 2016. It was about 10 days after I met with Adam Silver in New York, as you mentioned, and in the book. And so 10 days later, they had a vote, and they killed the project by a 5-4 count. Basically, they basically said we're not allowing this project to go ahead, and it effectively killed it. And a lot of the reasons that were stated up there were because of the port, and so that obviously had an impact on the council members. And so yeah, definitely it didn't help. If you're trying to get a major project built, it helps to get along with the neighbors in that neighborhood, and he
Yeah.
certainly was not getting along with the neighbors.
Right. Yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Hey, it's the nicest thing anybody said to me today. Thank you.
So transitioning now a little bit to when the Sonics relocated, there were a lot of factors that went into it. Clay Bennett, of course, purchasing the team from Oklahoma City, kind of had intentions of moving it, even though he said publicly he didn't want to. There were taxpayers who paid for the Seahawks new stadium and the Mariners new stadium that didn't want to do it again, and the fact that NBA wanted Seattle to renovate Key Arena. If you had to pick one, what do you think was the biggest factor that led to the Sonics relocating?
I think the biggest factor was they would not build them a new arena, and that was the story of professional sports for most of the last 30 years. Has been either build us an arena or a baseball stadium or a football stadium, or we're going to move to the next county, the next city, the next state. We're going to leave your local area if you don't give in and get us a stadium. And the best way to get those stadiums was through taxpayer funding because the cities don't want to shell out that kind of money. Sorry, not the cities. The owners don't want to shell out that kind of money. Team owners rarely want to spend, $1 billion to build their own facility when they can get people to do it for them for free. And here in Seattle, for years, for decades, we kind of were an open spigot. We allowed tax money to be, splurged into these new venues, these new stadiums, and any independent economist in America will tell you, independent, mind you, not paid by teams. Teams will pay economists all the time to say whatever they want to say. But the independent ones that have studied this issue will tell you that if a city spends hundreds of millions of dollars on a sports facility, it's almost impossible to make that money back over the lifetime of the deal. It's a terrible investment. You can make better money in a checking account, your average checking account, than you could in doing this. And so that people were really starting to question, like, why are we squandering this kind of money when cities claim they don't have money to help homeless people, they don't have money to help people that in education, or they don't have money to spend on roads and infrastructure, but they have money to throw away on sports venues that aren't providing any economic return. And that's been studied. It's been studied to death. So people will say, oh yeah, it generates money inside the stadiums themselves, inside the arenas themselves. But if you didn't have those arenas, people would be going to the other side of town and spending the same money on movies, on dinner, on shops. So there's a displacement of the money. That's all it is. It's not like you're adding new money by bringing sports teams here and by using public money to build these stadiums. Where it is profitable, where it can make you money, is if the owners themselves are spending the money on the stadiums and on the arenas. And that's what happened here with the Kraken. They ended up building basically a brand new arena under the old roof, but it's a brand new state of the art, $1.15 billion arena. But it was built with private money. And so then when you start generating revenues and splitting it with the city, then the city does get a benefit out of it. The taxpayers do get a benefit out of it. Where you don't is when had the taxpayers already spent the 1 billion themselves on this. You can do the math. I mean, how long is it going to take you to make that money back? It's going to take forever. And so that was the big thing. Nobody wanted to do this for the Sonics back by the time they were threatening to leave, because it had already been done so often here in Seattle, and people were starting to figure out that it was a losing game for taxpayers. And so that the lack of a new arena, the ability to get an arena done, was the big problem.
Yeah. So this is kind of a follow up to this, and it's kind of I hate to kind of ask a what if question, but I want to get your take on it because it's something I've been thinking about as I've been researching this.
Mm-hmm.
Howard Schultz bought the team. Was it early 2000s when he bought it?
Yeah, right around there.
Yeah. So of course, Starbucks CEO, super successful with that. Um, Gary Payton, he had a rough relationship with him. He went on to call him a con man. He said he didn't really know what he was doing. If you think Howard Schultz never bought the Sonics, would the team still be around if they had a different owner?
That's an excellent question, because the previous owner, whose sons are now involved in the hockey team, his sons, the Ackerley boys, um, were um, they were also part owners of the Sonics when they were here. But then what happened was they did a renovation of Key Arena, and that was in the mid '90s, so under the old owners. Um, and I've heard a lot of things said about it. It was a bit of a it was a nice renovation. It was okay, but it was patchwork. It's not what they needed. What they needed was to basically got the facility and build new luxury suites. New, I mean, that's where the money is in pro sports. It's in the luxury dollars that are being spent. It's in the club seating. It's in the luxury suites. It's the high end dollars. They're not really trying to court. There is room for your average fan off the street, but it's expensive to go to sporting events now. And the way they keep financing these athletes is through the luxury facilities. So just putting in a new paint job at Key Arena wasn't going to do the trick. They really needed to gut the whole facility and redesign it so that it could bring in the modern money that finances sports teams. And so that wasn't going to happen with the renovation they did. I can't remember what the final price tag on it was. It was like, might have been around 100 million or something like that. But just think of it, the renovation, quote unquote, they did now with Key Arena, turning it into climate pledge, it was 1.15 billion.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah, there's no comparison. You're talking about like 10 times the money, and or almost 12 times the money. And so that's what was needed in this case. And to say renovation's not doing it justice, they basically, like I said, they built a brand new arena, and they basically held the 40 million pound roof up with the equivalent of giant sized popsicle sticks. They held it up on stilts while they built the arena underneath it, while they dug down underground, built a brand new arena, a much bigger arena situation underneath it, underground, and then they put the roof back on afterwards. So if you walk up to the arena now, people will say, "Where's the arena?" You can't even see it because it just looks like a small little building with a little roof. You can't tell that it's an arena. People say, "Oh, that looks like an adjoining restaurant or something, a big one, albeit a big one." But yeah, the arena is all underground right now. It's a massive
Oh wow.
undertaking that
I
they
didn't know
did.
that.
Yeah, yeah. It's and not all of it, but if you walk in the front door of the arena, you're basically in the upper decks of the arena. So it confuses people the first time they get on an
Right.
elevator. They think they have to go up, but they actually have to go down to the seats. So that's kind of a fun thing. It was, I think it's 58 feet underground. I believe
Oh
that's how
wow.
far they dug it. Yeah, yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, I didn't know that. Um,
Yeah, and they have windows on the far end of the arena, but they're in the upper deck,
yeah.
and then you can see the street level. It kind of gives you perspective. The windows are great because it gives natural light. You don't feel like you're in a tomb,
Mhm.
but it you look out on the street and you realize, okay, the street's up there and we're down here. So it's a fun. It was a massive undertaking what they had to do, and so they weren't going to do that. I don't think Howard Schultz had it in him to do anything like that.
Yeah, right. So social media sort of really took off and the internet as well when the Seahawks ended up moving. Brian Robinson, a super fan, created this online campaign where he gathered support to bring the Sonics back. There was also someone that wanted to bring NHL to Seattle. I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now. Maybe
John Barr was his name.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, what impact do you think social media has had a big impact on why um, they ended up getting the Kraken and why they would probably get the Sonics back. Like, do you think that really affected like the push for it?
Yes, I do actually. I know both those guys really well. Brian Robinson founded his Sonics Rising group, and
Mm-hmm.
for years they lobbied, and then the hockey guys sort of became an offshoot of that, and had their own little thing going for a while, and then they kind of merged together a bit, and then Brian Robinson actually joined the campaign to bring the hockey team here because I think he realized that the arena was the key to getting the NBA back, and that
Yeah.
the hockey team, the NHL, was a key to getting the arena, and so Brian's a very smart man, and he saw where the tea leaves were falling, and he was one of the first people to break from Chris Hansen's group publicly and start supporting the Tim Lywicki effort to get Key Arena redesigned into Climate Pledge Arena. Saying that he broke with Chris Hansen, I don't think that's fair uh, to say. He never really broke from them, but he wanted to support whoever was going to bring the NBA back here. And I think at one point in time, he realized that Tim Lywicki was going to get it done faster. And so
Right.
he kept supporting both guys, but he put a lot of weight behind Tim Lywicki because he realized that Tim Lywicki was the key to getting Climate Pledge Arena built. And so he took a lot of heat for that, by the way, when he did that, because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people thought that that was the end of the Sonics, the end of the NBA, but it wasn't. It was just the beginning. And the thing people have to realize is that Brian Robinson doesn't control when the NBA expands here. Tim Lywicki doesn't control when the NBA expands here. The NBA, to a certain extent, Adam Silver doesn't even control it. It's the NBA owners
Mm-hmm.
that have to decide they want to expand, and Silver does the bidding of the owners, and that's literally the job of the sports commissioner. And so, as badly as people here wanted the NBA 5, 10 years ago, it wasn't going to happen just because they were making a lot of noise. It was going to happen when the NBA was ready. So I think in the end, the biggest thing that social media did was it kept people aware of the fact that there was great interest here in Seattle for for both sports, for the NBA and the NHL. But certainly because the NBA has been gone now for 18 years, and is it 18 years? I'm trying to think. No, I'm off. 16 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it's been gone for 16 years. People thought it was going to come back in a span of 2 or 3 years, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
really realistic. If you look at the history of sports, it usually takes, once a team leaves a market in any sport, it often takes about 20 years to get the team back here. Uh, and there's some exceptions. I mean,
The
we saw
Cleveland
exceptions with the
Browns.
Browns.
Yep.
Yeah, everybody always, oh, what about the Cleveland Browns? Yeah, that's fine. But what about the 18 other teams that had to wait
Mm-hmm.
20 years? I'm from Montreal. They lost the Expos in 2004. So that was 20 years ago, and they're no closer to getting a team
Yeah.
back, even though there's an effort that was undertaken recently to get a stadium built there to get baseball back. But it's a long game. They don't. It's not for anybody with a lack of patience. It takes time.
Mm-hmm. So now that you are an employee of the Kraken now, what's it like working for them after being there for the entire process of renovating Key Arena, working or talking to the Oakview group and the new ownership group, and then being there in Georgia when the NHL rewarded a team? Is it just kind of like a surreal experience, or was it like a natural, smooth transition?
For me, I think it felt like a natural, smooth transition. It's funny though; it's a good question to ask because for me, I felt like I was part of this all along. I felt like I was
Mm-hmm.
there from day one. I felt like I was there from day one minus about 700 days, let's say. But yeah, here I'm in an office, and a lot of people here still consider me the new employee, the new guy. And
Yeah.
I'm sure some of them are a little suspicious of the new guy. That happens sometimes, and
Mm-hmm.
I have to watch myself sometimes too because I might tend to act like I've been here all along. Um, and in fact, like those people here, I see that have been here for 5 years, and I'm thinking I never remembered seeing you like 8 years ago when all this was starting. And so, but it's you have to be new, you have to be a new employee, and I have to kind of temper that um, that that um, temper that feeling that I know all the answers to things. But it's not like walking into a new job for me. Definitely not. I feel like I've been there and seen a lot of the stuff up close, a lot of the key moments of the organization, and there's a lot of people here that haven't had that experience. So it's up to me to kind of share that with them and try to bring those stories to life. I'll give you an example. We have sixth anniversary of the franchise, which is coming up on December the 4th.
Oh,
That's
wow.
It'll be 6 years from when they got the thing awarded, and we're going to do a whole bunch of stories on our website about that. And so it's going to be up to me to kind of bring those stories to life, not only for the fans that are out there, but for a lot of people in this organization that aren't aware of what went on back then. A lot of them don't even realize that December 4th is the sixth anniversary of the franchise. It's just it's because they're working in a company, let's say, that they only became a part of 2 or 3 years ago in some cases. So it's up to me to try to bring those things to life and try to share those experiences of what it was like in Sea Island, Georgia, when it was awarded, what it was like in New York 6 weeks prior when the executive committee of the NHL basically gave the green light for the franchise, what it was like 8 years ago when Tim Lewicki showed up in Seattle with a plan to renovate Key Arena and almost got laughed out of the room initially by a lot of people. But I saw all those things, and the fact that we even have an arena now and a hockey team and are awaiting, hopefully, an
Hopefully.
NBA expansion process.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's a bit of a miracle given everything they had to go through. It's a bit of a minor miracle that they got this done, especially with private money. It's really a success story. That's, I think, unparalleled right now in the United States and in Canada. Getting an arena this size built with private money and then getting the teams right away to come in there and pull this off. I don't think this has ever been done.
Mhm. Right. So, last question. I think you can talk about this since you do like editorial stuff. The Kraken have kind of struggled out the gate this season. Do you think it's because of like a tough schedule, or is there some other things going on? I know Dunn got injured earlier this year. What's your take on their season so far?
Vince Dunn getting injured definitely did not help. He's
Mm-hmm.
he's a really key part of this team. He's going to be back in a couple of weeks.
Oh, good, good.
That's the expectation, and so that'll help. The schedule was tough, not right out of the chute, but it got tough about 2 weeks into the season.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Fortunately, they had built up enough of a cushion by winning games their first week to 10 days. I think they were 4-2-1 at one point. That helped. That really helped because now they went into a bit of a tailspin because they faced powerhouse after powerhouse on the East Coast, and I was just on that trip, and it wasn't easy for them.
Right.
And so they've kind of gotten through that, and then now they're going to have to. The schedule lightens up a bit in coming weeks, and they're going to have to build back up to a 500 record based on that schedule. And then, if you get to the holidays and you're around 500, it's anybody's game. Then you can play well into the season and still be a playoff contender. And I think that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to get them back to 500, and then hopefully they can go on a winning run at some point. That's what they did their playoff year. They kind of hung around 500 until November, till like mid to late November, and then they went on a nice little winning streak. And before you knew it, they were in the playoffs. And so that's kind of the plan right now.
Yeah. So like I'm a very new and very casual hockey fan, but I've really tried to make an effort into, learning more about the game. And what I've realized is that hockey's like I'm more of a football, basketball, baseball guy. Hockey is probably my favorite sport to watch. Like it's really fun, it's fast paced and all that. And I see why so many people like it now. Like I didn't understand before. So yeah, it's really cool. And I'm a Kraken fan, and I chose them because they had Nirvana as their song when they scored a goal.
That's right. It's funny
Yes,
when I hear Lithium come on, when I hear that song come on the radio now, I keep wanting to sing "Let's Go Kraken,"
right.
and
Yeah.
I'm surprised when that's not when I don't hear that on the radio. A couple of weeks ago, we were doing a feature on the in-game entertainment at the arena, the people doing the music and stuff, and I talked to the guy whose voice you hear actually singing that goal song when the guy who sings "I Like It," "Let's Go Kraken." He's one of
Oh
the three
yeah.
people that are on that. I think actually there's five people. It's him and his wife, and three other employees that are singing that version, that the modified version of Nirvana's song. So
I'm trying to imagine these like millionaires and billionaires like recording that and singing that. That's
yeah,
pretty
it'd be
funny.
funny. It'd be funny. Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Geoff, so much for doing this. Yeah, you gave me a lot of great insight, and I'm pretty naive to the sports business side of stuff, but like I feel like you really helped me like make it seem a little more clear to me and have a basic understanding of that. So I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you helping me out with this project.
No, no problem at all. You're asking the right questions, so that's a sign that you're starting to grasp what
Yep.
the important stuff that you have to get a handle of. Sports
Right.
business isn't easy. If it was, more reporters would be doing it.
Right.
It's really a lot of reporters have trouble with figures and facts and numbers, not facts, but figures and numbers. They definitely have trouble with, and they're intimidated by it. But I think once you get into it a little bit, it becomes a little clearer to see.
Mhm.
The number one rule is just follow the money. That's usually where
Right.
everything takes you.
Yeah, I'll remember that. All right. I'd like to thank our viewers for watching, and we'll see you next time.